And I think it was the culture of Yuri, of course, was from Tokyo originally, but she was aligned with the Kyoto group. And the Sister City piece was with the Kyoto group. And Kyoto is a very traditional place. It's really an old-fashioned place. I was just there in June, and it looks the same. It was wonderful, wonderful to be there, and stunning at the same time. How familiar it felt over the past 30 whatever years. Anyway, so we had the people who actually lived in Japan, the Japanese who moved to the US, and we used to say we're more Japanese than the Japanese. And then as Japan modernized, we had the sort of group in Tokyo, you know, the people who didn't want their culture presented in this traditional way. It was really complicated. That's what I mean about two eras at the museum. There was the first piece when I was sort of learning the trade, learning how to be a museum person, and running this program with really a level of expertise which was pretty shallow, as I think about it. Better than my predecessor, but nonetheless. And to some extent, really not understanding what these issues, what they meant to people. None of it, you know, all the work that was required, all that endless dinner party, razzmatazz stuff. I mean, we went to a lot of events, a lot of events. And I think that reflected the fact that we didn't know how to sort out what was the real work and what wasn't. And I don't think the Japanese knew either. I mean, they were brand new at the business of giving money away and stuff. So it was tough. But anyway, when I went to Japan in 86, 87, I had a Fulbright and I went and lived in Tokyo. And I got this whole other view, a whole other view. I didn't feel sort of trapped in the web of relationships in Kyoto. And I also did a lot of language work. So my Japanese got much better. And I developed this other network that I didn't feel was sort of criticizing me all the time. But also came back with this idea that we could look at Japan from another lens, that we could begin with what was familiar rather than what was different. And so things changed just enormously in the course of doing Teen Tokyo. And old staff left, and people on the board who were not supportive were pushed aside to a certain extent, which must have been hard. And it was a new era, and actually much more fun.
Yeah.
But in the course of doing my dissertation, what I was bringing to this was this constructivist way of thinking. You know, that you begin with the familiar and you build. It's very John Dewey and very George Hine and what I've come around to thinking about in the course of doing my doctoral work was the value of not beginning with the familiar. When you don't start with the familiar, when you begin with the imagination and wonder and awe and all that kind of stuff, which gets me back to thinking about the house, which constructivist ex-social studies teacher that I was, it bothered me more and more because it seemed to be more and more antiquated and was giving a more and more misleading view of what Japanese life was like. But actually, when I go back there now, I think this is a phenomenal environment. Where else can you slide your feet across straw mats and see light coming in through paper doors, and the upstairs, the tea room is just exquisite. You know, it's of another world, and a real aesthetic experience.